With that being said, we're going to go right into our very first breakout room dynamic. We're going to be doing an exercise called 1, 2, 4 all. So that means you're going to have a moment to just think by yourself as a one on a prompt that I'm going to have you reflect on. From there, you'll get partnered with someone in a breakout room to share a little bit more with that person. From there, that pair will get put with another pair, so you won't get put back into this big room. I'll just zip you on over because that's the beauty of Zoom. We can move very, very quickly so that we can continue the conversation. This allows us to have multiple conversations at once and to use the time more effectively. We'll do the very same thing again afterwards in order to start imagining what we can do with these funds. But again, making sure that we're creating a little bit of space to honor our own experiences and the experiences of those around us. Are there any questions about that? All right. So in order to get us started, we're going to spend 2 minutes reflecting on this question. How has COVID-19 impacted your daily lived experiences? Think about your life before the pandemic. What were your hopes and fears then? How have they changed, if at all, during this pandemic? I'm setting my timer for 2 minutes. Again, how has COVID-19 impacted your daily lived experience? What hopes and fears did you have before the pandemic? And how have those changed, if at all, since the start of this all? Feel free to take notes, do what you have to do to process. You have about 1.5 minutes left to reflect personally, and then you'll be paired with someone. All right, your 2 minutes of reflection are up. In just a moment, I'm going to open the breakout room. So you will be invited to join a breakout room. There will be one other person in your room. Some of you may not have been, just because I know a couple people came off and on, so you might not have been placed just yet. If you'll give me a moment, I'll open the rooms and I'll stay on and make sure everyone has a partner. In your pair, first, please introduce yourself and tell your partner what it is that brought you to this conversation, and then start sharing with your partner some of your reflections. So you'll have a total of 5 minutes with your partner to introduce yourself, share why you're here, and begin sharing your reflections on what it's been like to operate and live in this pandemic. Are there any questions?
I have a message from one of the ASL interpreters. If anyone needs ASL interpretation, please stay in the main room for a moment so that we can make sure folks are placed in the right breakout room.
Thank y'all so much for ensuring we have accessibility. Again, if you need ASL interpretation, please stay in the main room, even if you've already been invited to a room, and we'll make sure that everyone gets paired where they need to go. All right, I'm opening the rooms now. Once everyone has gone in, we'll drop the same message in the chat so you have it with your partner as well. But enjoy your conversations.
Andrea, just for clarification, did you want me to join room 8?
No, thank you. I need to add Angie to that room. This was where some were
A
on.
heads up that this is still being streamed. This main room is still being streamed to Facebook Live.
Thank you. Perfect. So if anyone is watching from home, and since this is being streamed to Facebook Live, I encourage you to do the same reflection. We haven't had very many opportunities to just stop and think about the impact on us of this global pandemic. And we deserve the time to pause and really acknowledge the impact for ourselves. Same for anyone who is left in this room, a nice opportunity to just reflect and acknowledge we've been living through this. We deserve a break too. The participants in the breakout rooms have about 10 seconds left with their pairs. In just a moment, that's my timer going off. I'm going to be moving them into larger pairings to continue the conversation. Okay, so now those small groups are introducing themselves to each other, sharing their stories, and we've added the request to share the stories of any families or friends that have moved them during this time in the pandemic. Welcome, Helen. I'm about to put you into a small group so that you can join the conversations that are occurring. Folks are just sharing their experiences in the pandemic right now.
Thank you.
I lied. It's not letting me add you. Jax or Mara, if either of you can try to, I don't know why. It's not coming up for me.
Yes, I can move Helen. Where would you like Helen?
Room 2, please.
Okay. Awesome.
Thank you. The participants in the rooms know that they have 10 minutes left for their conversation, and then we'll be able to hear a little bit of what's been happening in those rooms. If anyone is watching, participants will be back in about 4 minutes to share any common themes in their stories. I did forget that they get a minute before the rooms close automatically. So folks should be trickling in the next 40 seconds if they're not clicking on the button that asks them to leave.
That's always a good sign.
Good conversation if they're not leaving right away. There
That's
we
right.
go. Beautiful. Folks are trickling back. There's only about 15 seconds left before everyone else joins us. Beautiful. Everyone should be back here in the large room now. I hope everyone had an opportunity to share their stories and the stories of those around them. The task force members were broken up into different rooms so that they were all able to interact with different people and hear different stories. I'm not going to have everyone share out all their stories because I definitely want to make sure we get into the imagining as we do want to spend this money and take care of our people. So with that being said, I would love to hear from just a few folks. What were some of the common themes that came up in the stories that were shared in your room?
I'll share a little bit. In our room, one common theme was around housing and how COVID-19 has made worse a housing shortage, and that people have experienced, communities have experienced gentrification, people have experienced individually discrimination, particularly against renters of color. And so that's a common concern. And then how different economies have been impacted as well, such as the creative economy and other economies that have been severely impacted or shut down entirely as a result of the pandemic.
Absolutely. Thank you, Larry. Did anybody else want to share some of the common themes they heard in their room? Karen, I saw that you had unmuted.
Yeah, I was going to say a couple of us had experience in the school system or in schools education and noted about the discrepancy and connectivity amongst people in our classrooms, and really having to reach out to people individually to make sure that they were still on board. So I think connectivity is an issue, but not just installing broadband, but making sure that people know how to access it. And that really requires individuals meeting individuals. Of course, we're, concerned about climate change and how making sure that we're really building back better. I was glad to hear that violence prevention is going to be a part of this, and also suggested that water be made safer by making sure that lead is out of water. So that means replacing a lot of lead pipes.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. And we can definitely get into the imagining in our next grouping as well. Also, just to name, since you named connectivity, what a privilege it is for those of us who are a part of this conversation, that we have an opportunity to even join, that we have access to the internet, that we know how to get on Zoom, and that we're able to communicate in this way. So making sure that we're remembering all the folks who don't have access to this opportunity just here and now. Beautiful. Well, I know there are so many more stories that have been shared and that have been held. I want us to continue holding those as we turn to the imagining. So I'm going to give you another 2 minutes to reflect. Having heard the stories that you've heard, having heard the introduction or the overview that Patrice shared with us earlier around what can be spent and what can't be spent, how is it that you would like the city of Providence to use these funds to address the needs and the stories you shared? So again, you'll have 2 minutes of reflection, and then we'll get into breakout rooms again so we can do a lot of imagining collectively. All right, your 2 minutes of reflection are up. I'm going to go ahead and put you in a brand new pair. I hope I try to remember as much as possible. So, an opportunity to meet someone new and start all of this imagining. You'll have 5 minutes with your partner and then once again be whisked right into another room to continue the imagining. Please have one person from each of the larger foursomes ready to present some of your ideas once you come back. I'll make sure to drop that message again, but for now, enjoy your conversations. For those of you watching at home, our pair shares have been combined, and now they're in a slightly larger group, continuing to imagine how we can spend these funds to best support Providence residents. They'll be back in this larger group in about 8 minutes. I've just closed the small rooms, so folks will be coming back in about 30 seconds. We'll ask them to report out their imaginings. Thankfully, there are task force members in the small rooms, so they've already been hearing a lot of this information. Just want to make sure that everyone gets an opportunity to hear some of the imagining. Welcome back, everyone. It's always so hard as a facilitator to be virtual and not be able to eavesdrop to what's going on. I'm a person that likes to imagine possibilities, so I'm so excited to hear what some of the things that you all came up with. So I would love to hear for some folks to start sharing what are some of the ways they imagine the possibilities of spending these funds. And since we are on tight time, I'm actually going to ask two of our task force members to be put on the spot. Larry and Paige, if you wouldn't mind sharing a little bit about what you heard. That way folks also have an opportunity to say, oh, actually what I meant was, in case any of that information is gone, since you'll be bringing this back to the rest of the task force as well. So little voluntold opportunity for both Larry and Paige.
So Andrea, we had agreed in our small group that Paige wouldn't have to do that. So I'm going to jump in.
Beautiful. Thank you, Jennifer.
On behalf of Ro and Karen and Carmen and Paige, we had some large imagining. We really wanted to imagine a city in which there was a major investment in removing lead from the pipes at the homeownership level, because there's been so much work done in the city infrastructure, but unless we do that at that, whatever you call it, the last 30 feet, we're still exposing future generations and the people who are living in homes now to a risk of harm. We really focused on investments that can be made that are really transformative, but that can be made once and make a big change because of the nature of how this thing is working. And so the second area was really looking at municipal broadband access. The digital divide is so real and so harsh, and really underscored in the last 2 years as so many people have been forced to do so many more things, even to the fact that you cannot access rental assistance except by going online. And that's now true for most public benefit programs, actually. So we're aware that One Neighborhood Builders did a pilot during the pandemic about universal neighborhood-based broadband access. And there are many, many cities in the United States that have done that at the municipal level. So we were really jazzed up about maybe thinking about a world in which all Providence residents have broadband access at the city level without having to try and purchase that at the household level. The third thing that we talked about was access to home ownership for community members who've been traditionally excluded by government policy. After World War II, Black families and other families of color were specifically excluded from access to capital, from home ownership, redlining, the building of the hospitals, the building of the interstates in Providence specifically have destroyed many traditionally stable Black communities and other communities of color. So really thinking about this capital as a way to get traditionally excluded families into homeownership and the intergenerational transfer of wealth that can come with that. And then finally, each of those three areas contributes to really interventions that would be supportive of the city's youth, whether it's opportunities for job training and jobs in the home ownership and building new homes, lead pipe remediation, broadband access, all of those really create more infrastructure to create more opportunities for youth. So that's what we were imagining. I hope others have lots more imagining to share.
Thank you so much, Jennifer, and for saving Paige for me putting her on the spot. I love all of this imagining, especially as someone who recently had to move out of Providence and into Pawtucket because I just couldn't afford to stay and couldn't find anything that would allow me to afford to stay. I love hearing this, and I'm hopeful that this is not the future for others in Rhode Island. Larry, is there anyone in your group that was going to save you? Or
Before we
you?
move on to Larry, I'm so sorry to
Cool.
interrupt. Thank
No.
you, Jennifer, for doing that awesome recap. There was one point from our pair share that Ro added in that I know didn't get into the larger group conversation. It was also around supporting BIPOC artists and ensuring that we are continuing to look at and focus on how artists have been impacted by the pandemic. And some ideas around including BIPOC artists as part of like a minimum income kind of program that we may be considering. And also the idea of using these funds to expand the guaranteed income pilot so that it can include more people. So I want to make that was also included for the record.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Larry?
I'm happy to share unless one of my fellow roommates want to lead off. Okay. So we had three main themes that I'll center our conversation around. One is continuing the conversation around housing and the construction of affordable rental units and ensuring that they truly are low-income affordable units. There's definitely a need for construction. There's a need for addressing discrimination that happens in the renting process. We heard in our breakout that there are professors of color that can't find rental units because the owners won't rent to people of color. And so addressing both the availability but also discrimination that's faced by Providence residents is a huge issue. There was also conversation about transportation infrastructure, and that is obviously part of a broader conversation about transportation networking throughout the state, but there's a lot of areas that are inaccessible that if you don't have a car and don't drive, and unfortunately our city and our state is too beautiful of a state to not be able to access it solely because transportation doesn't fully meet the needs of its riders. And then lastly, there was some discussion around harm reduction centers. And while there was legislation passed by the General Assembly that would allow for harm reduction centers and other measures to be made available, it would require local approval by the city council and then funding for construction of harm reduction centers, and investing in harm reduction strategies would be helpful and would certainly help to stem the overdose crisis that we're seeing worsen. So those are the things that I wanted to make sure were shared. If there's anything else, anyone else from the breakout room wants to share as well.
There is. You came in late. Thank you, Larry. That was great. I started off with mental health, and I guess there was just so many components to mental health and problems that arise from mental health, not just through the pandemic, but things that were systemic. But I guess when we talk about mental health, having a robust support group of referrals and contacts and using the money that way, so that when people do discuss what their problems are, there are resources to help them get through it. Because if I'm having issues, but the root cause of my issue could be I was abused, but I'm also having issues with housing. Where do I go? Who do I go see? I mean, and it could be education, it could be life skills, it could be financial management or whatever, just having a robust support group behind and tracking with the mental health part.
Beautiful. Thank you all so much. Was there anything else, any final thoughts that you really wanted to make sure got heard by task force members while we still have them here? Recognizing that we're at time. Okay, and these task force members, this is not the last time that you have access to them. They do meet every Friday at noon, and there is opportunity for public comment. So if you go to sleep tonight and you're like, oh my God, I can't believe I didn't share this amazing idea that's going to fix everything in Providence, please make sure you join the next task force meeting. I'm sure the task force members will want to hear from you. This should be an open conversation between residents of Providence and the administration and the task force that's going to make sure that these needs are met. So thank you all so much for joining today. I really appreciate the fact that y'all were willing to engage in the small group conversation. Super hard not to be involved, but I hope that you all appreciated the space. Jax or anybody else from the city, if there's anything else you all want to share. If not, I think we might be done for the evening.
Jax actually just mentioned our survey and linked to it, and just wanted to note that if you could please spread among your network. So we want to make sure we get as much input as possible. Our real goal is to hit upwards of 1,000 people to be able to fill out this survey. So we have really great data in terms of how you expect the city would want to see the city use these funds. So please go to our website. There's also a ton of other information there. We're continuing to keep it as updated as possible. You can link to our community meetings, our task force meetings there as well. So please go to the website, share the survey, and keep informed and share this with other people. Thank you.
Beautiful. Thank you all so much for joining us on a Friday evening. We hope you have a wonderful weekend. And thank you so much for making your contribution to the future of Providence. Have a great night, everyone.
Good.